I met Benjamin at the campus bookstore during my junior year. He was working behind the counter, and I was frantically searching for a textbook that had been sold out everywhere else. When he checked the back room and actually found a copy, I thought he was my hero. He had this quiet confidence about him. Not cocky like the other guys I dated, just steady. We started talking, and before I knew it, we were spending every free moment together. Those college years were magical. Benjamin would walk me to class, and we'd spend hours in the library together, him helping me with statistics while I proofread his history papers. We talked about everything, our dreams, our families, what we wanted out of life. Neither of us came from money, but we had these grand plans about building something together. He wanted to get into project management, and I was majoring in business with dreams of climbing the corporate ladder. We were a team, and I genuinely believe we could conquer the world together. After dating for 3.5 years, Benjamin proposed during our senior year with a modest ring he'd saved up for months to buy. I said yes immediately. The wedding was small and simple. We couldn't afford anything fancy, but it felt perfect. Just our families and closest friends and a little church ceremony, followed by dinner at a local restaurant. We moved into a tiny one-bedroom apartment and started our lives together with nothing but love and ambition. The first few years of marriage were exactly what I'd hoped for. We both landed entry-level positions. Him at a construction company doing project coordination, me at a small marketing firm as an assistant. We were broke but happy, spending our evenings cooking cheap meals and dreaming about our future house, our future kids, all the places we'd travel once we made it big. Benjamin was supportive of everything I wanted to do, encouraging me to take on extra projects at work and celebrating every small victory with me. But somewhere around our 7th year of marriage, things started to shift. I got promoted to team lead at the marketing firm, and suddenly I was managing people, making real decisions, earning actual respect in the professional world. The promotion came with a significant raise, and for the first time in our marriage, I was making more money than Benjamin. At first, I was just excited to contribute more to our household. But as the months went by, I started noticing things about Benjamin that hadn't bothered me before. He seemed so content with his position. While I was staying late to prove myself, networking with colleagues, reading business books to improve my skills, Benjamin would come home at 5:30 every day and settle into his routine of dinner, TV, and bed. When I'd share my excitement about new projects or strategies I was developing, he'd smile and nod. But I could tell he didn't really understand the significance of what I was accomplishing. You should be pushing harder at your job. Benjamin, I started saying during our dinner conversations, you've been in the same position for 3 years now. Don't you want more? He'd give me that patient look and explain that he was happy where he was and that he didn't need to be in charge of everything to feel fulfilled. But that answer started to frustrate me more and more. How could he be satisfied with mediocrity when I was working so hard to excel? When I got promoted again, this time to department head, the disparity between us became even more obvious. I was managing an entire team, overseeing major campaigns, getting recognition from senior leadership. Meanwhile, Benjamin was still doing the same project coordination he'd been doing for years. Seemingly unbothered by his lack of advancement, I started to feel embarrassed when colleagues asked about my husband's career. What was I supposed to say? That he was perfectly content being average. I didn't work this hard to settle for a husband who's okay being mediocre. I told him one night after a particularly successful presentation at work, we used to have the same dreams. Benjamin, what happened to wanting more? He tried to explain that he found satisfaction in doing his job well, that not everyone needed to climb the corporate ladder to be happy. But his words just sounded like excuses to me. Around this time, I started reading more about women's empowerment and workplace equality. The more I learned, the more I realized that Benjamin's lack of ambition wasn't just disappointing. It was actually part of a larger problem with men in general. Here I was, breaking barriers and proving that women could be just as successful as men. And my own husband was perfectly happy to let me carry the financial burden while he coasted along doing the bare minimum. Men today are worthless. I found myself saying during girls' nights with friends, they should honestly be jailed for how lazy and accepting they are. Our mothers fought for equality, and this generation of men thinks they can just sit back and let women do all the heavy lifting. My friends would nod along, sharing their own stories about disappointing husbands and boyfriends who lacked drive. It was during this period that I met Marcus. He'd been promoted to team lead in another department, and we started collaborating on cross-departmental projects. From our first meeting, I could tell he was different from Benjamin. Marcus had this energy about him, this hunger for success that I recognized because I felt it too. When we discussed strategy, his eyes would light up with the same passion I felt about advancing my career. Marcus understood the pressure of leadership in ways Benjamin never could. When I'd complain about lazy team members or unrealistic deadlines, Marcus knew exactly what I was talking about because he was dealing with the same challenges. We started staying late together, working on presentations and brainstorming new initiatives. Those conversations energized me in ways I hadn't felt in years. At least Marcus gets it. I started telling Benjamin when he'd complain about my long work hours. He understands what it takes to actually succeed in business. Benjamin would get this hurt look in his eyes. But honestly, what did he expect? Was I supposed to pretend that his 9-to-5 mentality was impressive when I was surrounded by people who actually had drive? The more time I spent with Marcus, the more I realized what I'd been missing in my marriage. Here was a man who respected ambition, who valued intelligence and leadership. When Marcus and I would grab drinks after work to discuss upcoming projects, I felt like myself again, not like some nagging wife trying to motivate her lazy husband, but like a successful professional being appreciated for her accomplishments. Benjamin started getting suspicious about my late nights and weekend work sessions. He'd make comments about how much time I was spending at the office, asking pointed questions about my colleagues and projects. His jealousy was so transparent and pathetic. Instead of working on himself, instead of trying to match my level of success, he was going to play the victim and act like I was the problem. You're never home anymore. He complained one evening when I got back from a particularly productive strategy session with Marcus. It feels like work is more important to you than our marriage. The accusation was so unfair I could barely respond. Of course, work was important to me. I was actually good at it. Unlike some people who are content to drift through life without any real purpose, someone has to be successful in this relationship. I shot back. Someone has to have ambition and drive. I'm sorry if that makes you uncomfortable, but I'm not going to apologize for being good at my job. Benjamin went quiet after that, which was typical. Whenever I challenged him to step up, he'd retreat into himself instead of rising to meet my expectations. The emotional connection I was developing with Marcus felt like a lifeline. Finally, someone who appreciated my intelligence, my work ethic, my leadership abilities. When Marcus would compliment my strategic thinking or praise my presentation skills, I felt valued in ways I hadn't experienced with Benjamin in years. Was it my fault that my husband had chosen to stagnate while other men continued to grow and evolve? I wasn't doing anything wrong by spending time with someone who actually understood me. Marcus and I were collaborating professionally, sharing ideas, supporting each other's career goals. If Benjamin couldn't handle his wife having meaningful professional relationships, that said more about his insecurities than it did about my behavior. The confrontation I'd been dreading finally came on a Tuesday evening in March. Benjamin was waiting for me when I got home from another late work session, and I could tell from his expression that he'd worked himself up into some kind of dramatic intervention mode. "We need to talk about Marcus," he said, his voice shakier than I'd ever heard it. "I know something's going on between you two, and I can't pretend I don't see it anymore." The accusation hit me like a slap. Here I was, working harder than I'd ever worked in my life, achieving more success than either of us had dreamed of, And instead of being proud of me, he was going to make it about his petty jealousies. "What exactly are you accusing me of?" I asked, though my heart was pounding. Benjamin had never confronted me so directly about anything, and his sudden backbone caught me off guard. "I'm not stupid." "Destiny. The late nights, the weekend calls, the way you light up when you talk about him. You're having an affair, and I want it to stop." His voice was getting stronger, more confident, which only made me angrier. Where was this assertiveness when I was begging him to advance his career? Where was this passion when I needed him to be a real partner? So what if I spend time with Marcus? He's a team lead. At least he understands ambition. The words came out harsher than I'd intended, but I was tired of pretending, tired of acting like Benjamin's mediocrity was acceptable when I was surrounded by men who actually had their lives together. Benjamin's face went pale, and for a moment I thought he might back down, like he always did. But instead, he straightened up and looked me directly in the eyes. "I want you to quit your job if you can't maintain professional boundaries. Then you need to remove yourself from that environment." I actually laughed out loud. The audacity of this man, who'd contributed virtually nothing to our household success, thinking he could give me ultimatums about my career. "Are you out of your mind? Quit my job. I'm the one paying our bills." "Benjamin, someone has to pay the bills in this house." "You're sure not doing it." "I wear the pants around here." "Benjamin, not you." I expected him to crumble under the weight of that truth, but instead something shifted in his expression. He looked at me with a coldness I'd never seen before and said, "Then I guess we're done." 3 days later, I was served with divorce papers. I couldn't believe Benjamin had actually gone through with it. This was the same man who couldn't even send back incorrect orders at restaurants. And now he was filing for divorce. My first instinct was that this was some kind of bluff, a desperate attempt to get my attention and force me back into the role of grateful wife. But when I called him to discuss it, he wouldn't even take my calls. Fine. If Benjamin wanted to play hardball, I could play hardball too. I hired the best divorce lawyer I could find, a sharp woman from downtown who specialized in protecting successful women from vindictive ex-husbands. If Benjamin thought he was going to walk away with half of everything I'd worked for, he had another thing coming. "Oh, so you think you're going to get anything out of me?" "Think again." "Benjamin," I told him during one of our few direct conversations during the proceedings, "you don't deserve a dime of my money. I'm the one who built a career while you sat around being comfortable with mediocrity." But as the legal process continued, I started to realize that Benjamin wasn't the pushover I thought he was. He'd hired his own attorney, some no-nonsense guy who seemed to know exactly what he was doing. When it came time for financial disclosures, I was confident that my higher salary and professional success would work in my favor. The judge would see that I was the primary breadwinner, the one who'd actually contributed to our lifestyle. What I hadn't expected was for Benjamin's lawyer to dig so deep into our finances. I'd been setting aside money from my raises and bonuses into a separate savings account, money that I'd earned through my own hard work and success. It wasn't like I was hiding anything malicious. I just wanted to have some security. Some funds that were clearly mine in case Benjamin ever decided to get lazy about contributing to our household expenses. But when that account came to light during the proceedings, Benjamin's lawyer painted it like some kind of betrayal. "Your Honor, Mrs. Patterson has been secretly diverting marital assets into a hidden account, showing a clear pattern of deception and financial misconduct." The judge, an older man who probably didn't understand the realities of modern professional women, actually seemed to take this seriously. "I earned that money, I tried to explain to the court. Every dollar in that account came from my salary, my bonuses, my professional success. How is it hiding assets to save money that I worked for?" But the judge wasn't interested in the logic of my position. He seemed more concerned with some outdated notion of marital transparency than with recognizing my right to financial independence. When the final ruling came down, I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Not only was Benjamin not paying me spousal support, but I was required to split the hidden savings account with him. Half of the money I'd earned through my own merit, my own professional achievements, was going to the man who'd been content to coast through life while I carried our household. The whole system was rigged against successful women. Here I was, the victim of a husband who couldn't handle his wife's success, and somehow I was being punished for having the drive and ambition he'd always lacked. Benjamin walked out of that courtroom looking satisfied with himself, like he'd actually accomplished something instead of just benefiting from a biased legal system. Even after the divorce was finalized, I couldn't let go of how unfair the whole situation had been. When mutual friends would ask what happened, I made sure they understood the real story. How Benjamin had sabotaged my career advancement, how he'd been threatened by my success, how he'd used the legal system to steal money I'd rightfully earned. Some of them seemed sympathetic, nodding along when I explained how difficult it was to be married to someone who lacked ambition. But as the months passed, I started noticing that those same friends were pulling away from me. Invitations to social gatherings stopped coming. When I'd reach out to organize girls' nights or dinner parties, people were always busy or had other plans. It was like they'd all coordinated to exclude me from the social circle I'd been part of for years. Meanwhile, my relationship with Marcus had fizzled out completely. Once the divorce proceedings started, he'd been transferred to another department. And without the daily collaboration, we barely saw each other. When I tried to maintain our connection through calls and texts, he seemed increasingly distant. Eventually, he stopped responding altogether, leaving me to realize that what I'd thought was a meaningful professional and personal relationship had apparently meant nothing to him. The isolation was suffocating. I'd lost my husband, my social circle, and the man I'd thought understood and appreciated me. My professional success, which had once felt so important and validating, now seemed hollow without anyone to share it with. I'd spend evenings in my new apartment, wondering how everything had gone so wrong when all I'd done was refuse to settle for mediocrity. Sometimes I'd drive past our old house and see Benjamin's car in the driveway, knowing he was inside living the simple, unambitious life he'd always preferred. He'd gotten exactly what he wanted, freedom from a wife who expected more from him, half of my hard-earned savings, and apparently the sympathy of all our former friends. Meanwhile, I was starting over at 42, professionally successful but completely alone. The unfairness of it all still burns me up inside. I spent years trying to motivate Benjamin, trying to help him reach his potential, trying to build something meaningful together. When that failed, I found connection with someone who shared my values and drive A, and somehow I'm the one who ended up punished for it. I'm the one who lost everything, while Benjamin got to play the victim and walk away with half of what I'd worked for. Now I'm 48 years old, and I can see clearly how the whole situation unfolded. Benjamin never deserved what I was trying to build with him. He was comfortable being average, comfortable letting me carry the weight of our ambitions while he coasted along and doing the minimum when I finally found someone who appreciated my drive and intelligence. Benjamin couldn't handle the competition. Instead of stepping up and proving he was worth fighting for, he took the coward's way out and ran to a lawyer. The legal system, designed by and for people who don't understand what it takes to succeed in today's professional world, rewarded his mediocrity and punished my excellence. Our former friends, probably threatened by my success and independence, chose to side with the safe, predictable option rather than supporting someone who'd actually made something of herself. Marcus turned out to be just another disappointment, someone who was happy to enjoy my company and benefit from my insights when it was convenient, but who didn't have the backbone to stand by me when things got complicated. Just like Benjamin, he was ultimately more comfortable taking the easy path than fighting for something real. I've learned that most people are threatened by women who refuse to accept limitations. They're comfortable with wives who stay in their lane, who don't push their husbands to be better, who don't demand excellence from the people around them. When you refuse to settle, when you insist on building something meaningful, when you won't apologize for your success, people get uncomfortable. They'd rather tear you down than examine their own mediocrity. So here I am, professionally accomplished but personally isolated, surrounded by people who chose the easy path over the excellent one. Benjamin got his quiet, unambitious life. Marcus got to avoid any real commitment or complications. Our former friends got to maintain their comfortable social dynamics without having to confront what real drive and ambition look like. And I'm left with the knowledge that I refuse to settle, refuse to apologize for wanting more, refuse to dim my light to make other people comfortable. Maybe that makes me difficult. Maybe that makes me demanding. But at least I know I never compromised my standards or accepted mediocrity just because it was easier than fighting for something better.